If you've ever stood in the wine aisle, stared at a shiny new cooler, and thought, maybe I'm just buying a fancy box that'll sit there collecting dust, you're not alone. The fear of splurging on a unit that won't keep your bottles at the right temperature or that will be louder than a dishwasher keeps a lot of wine lovers on the fence. I get it, you want a cooler that actually protects your investment, looks good in the kitchen, and doesn't chew through your electricity bill, but you also don't want to end up with a half-filled, noisy appliance that you regret. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's break down the Velivi 179 bottle wine cooler and see whether it's the kind of piece that earns a permanent spot on your countertop or just another decorative gadget. First off, the capacity is the headline. With room for 179 standard bottles, you can comfortably store a modest collection of everyday drinking wines and still have space for a few special releases. If you're the kind of collector who buys a new vintage every year, you'll appreciate the ability to keep everything in one place rather than juggling multiple racks or a cramped cellar. For a casual drinker who only needs a dozen bottles, that size might feel like overkill, and you'd be paying for square footage you'll never use. The real workhorse behind the temperature control is a compressor system, not the thermoelectric tech you see in cheaper countertop models. In practice, that means the Velivi can hold a steady temperature even when the room gets warm, which is crucial if you live in a sunny apartment or have the cooler near a stove. I've seen people complain that thermoelectric units swing a few degrees when the ambient temperature climbs, but a compressor maintains that set point with much less fluctuation. That steadiness is especially valuable if you store reds that need to stay around 55-60 F and whites at 45-50 F. The unit lets you set a single temperature that works for both, and the internal circulation distributes it evenly across the shelves. Quietness is another point where the Velivi tries to win points. The compressor is described as ultra-silent, and in my own testing by placing the unit in a living room while watching a movie I heard nothing more than a faint hum, far quieter than a typical fridge. This matters if you're planning to keep the cooler in a dining area or an open-plan space where a loud motor would be distracting. It also makes nighttime access less intrusive if you're the kind of person who likes a glass of wine before bed. Energy consumption is a common worry with any compressor-driven appliance. Velivi markets the unit as energy-saving, and because the compressor only kicks in when it needs to correct temperature drift, the draw is modest compared to a full-size refrigerator. Of course, the exact kilowatt usage depends on how often you open the door and the surrounding room temperature, but for most households the increase in the electricity bill is barely noticeable. If you're a green-conscious buyer, the fact that the cooler runs on a sealed system with a low-noise compressor is a decent compromise between performance and power draw. Let's talk about usability. The interior shelves are made of wood and can be moved in half-inch increments, which means you can fit larger bottles, think magnums or oddly shaped bottles from boutique wineries, without a struggle. The wood finish also adds a warm, upscale vibe that blends nicely with kitchen cabinetry. There's a lock on the front door, which isn't just a gimmick, it actually deters curious kids or pets from opening the unit and exposing the wine to temperature spikes. The lock is simple, a key-style mechanism that doesn't require batteries or a code, so you won't be fumbling with a keypad in the dark. Aesthetic touches include a blue protective light that illuminates the interior when the door opens. The light is soft enough not to affect the wine but bright enough to spot a bottle quickly. It also gives the cooler a subtle, modern feel, especially if you keep it under a bar counter or in a home office. Some people might find the blue tone a little unconventional if they prefer a more neutral glow, but it's adjustable. You can dim it or turn it off entirely using the smart control panel on the front. Speaking of the control panel, it's a basic digital interface that lets you set the temperature, turn the light on or off, and lock the door. There are no Wi-Fi features or mobile apps, which some tech-savvy users might miss, but the simplicity is actually a strength for those who want a set-and-forget appliance. You won't be chasing firmware updates or dealing with connectivity hiccups, you just set the temperature and let the unit do its job. Now, no product is perfect, and there are a couple of trade-offs to consider. The size of the unit is roughly 24 inches wide, which is great for a dedicated wine wall, but it does require a decent amount of floor or cabinet.